about discipline Agile and how we can apply that in the real world. So, like I said, my name is Klaus, and even though my name sounds Germanic, I am really from Denmark. When I'm not working, I enjoy taking our dog for hikes in our local mountains, and I also really enjoy photography. And here's a photo that I took up in Ilulissat Ice Fjord in Greenland. When I am working, I am part of PMI's Enterprise Project Management Office, or EPMO, and we empower change makers who are both ranging from students, volunteers, entrepreneurs, specialists, or business leaders of really any age or background. And what we all have in common is that as change makers, we want to drive and bring positive change to this world. And we give you the tools to succeed. So project management skills and agile practices, they don't just help organizations get stuff done. They also help people get things done both inside and outside of work. And anyone who needs them, can use them to get work done and get stuff done. So what are we going to explore here today? So we're going to look first at what is Discipline Agile. Then we're going to look at 3 examples of Discipline Agile being applied out in the real world. So first, how DA was applied to scale Agile across a large, complex program. We're going to look at how DA was applied to a non-software team. And then finally, we're going to be looking at patterns and anti-patterns of evolving your way of working. And we're going to wrap up with question and answers. So like Anthony said, feel free to put your questions in the chat. Put a Q in front of it. That's a really good idea. Then we sort of have a sense of where the questions are. You can ask them really anytime throughout this, and you can also save them for the end. We'll leave that up to you. We are also going to be having some sort of interactive sessions throughout this presentation, and we're going to be using the chat for that as well. All right. As we get started here, I'd like for you to find pen and paper or some other way of taking notes. And the first thing that I'd like you to do, either with your pen and paper or some other way of taking notes, it could be on your laptop in a note app or whatever it may be, is I would like you to consider this question right here. What is your current knowledge of Discipline Agile? And we're going to use sort of this subjective 1 to 10 scale, where 1 is, I really don't know anything about Discipline Agile, and 10, I know all there is to know about Discipline Agile, or are you somewhere in the middle? So just find that pen and paper, or again, some other way of taking note, and just ponder on this question. What is your current knowledge of Discipline Agile? Ranging on this subjective scale of 1 to 10, and write that number down, again, either on your paper or on your in another way of taking note. And then hang on to that, because we are going to come back to this question towards the end of this presentation. So what is Discipline Agile? Let's look more closely at that. So Discipline Agile gives you the freedom to choose, both teams and organizations, to find a way of working, or WOW, as we sometimes abbreviate it, that is a fit for the work that they do, how they work together, and also the constraints that they face at work. Discipline Agile also gives you a toolkit where the team's choices come in the form of Agile, Lean, and traditional techniques that are captured, organized, and curated in what we call the DA toolkit, also sometimes called the DA browser. And we are going to be looking at that here throughout the next hour. Finally, DA is what you can sort of think of as a map and compass, as in the first time you looked at a map or a compass, you were likely lost. You're like, well, I'm not sure what that means. What does those little line means, those little squiggly lines on the map, or even, what does north mean, and how do I translate that onto the map? Well, when you then learn how to read a map and compass, it sort of became second nature, and like, yeah, I can use this to navigate the terrain and navigate wherever I might be in the world. It's a little bit similar here with the DA toolkit, that the first time you may see it, it may be a little confusing and a little overwhelming and well, I'm not quite sure how to navigate it, because, there are all these choices in here. Where do I start? How do I make a decision? Same thing here. So once you start to get more familiar with the DA toolkit or the DA browser, it will start to become second nature, and it's going to be very easy and very straightforward for you and your teams to start making decisions based on that curated toolkit that the DA toolkit is. DA also takes a phased approach, and we're going to look a little bit more closely at this as we come into some of the examples from from the real world. But we wanted to just to talk briefly about it here at the beginning. So the phased approach the DA takes is that most Agile teams, they use phases when delivering work, yet a lot of them will sort of hide it and not really be transparent about it. So why not give them a proven structure to do that? The three phases we have is we have inception, and the aim of inception is to do just enough work to get organized and get going in the right direction. Then we have the construction phase, which is sort of doing the actual work, and the aim of construction is to produce this consumable solution where we have sufficient functionality that's still of value to the stakeholder. As in, we want to do just enough work that we are as quick as possible to finish it so we can get it into the hands of the customers and deliver value, yet we don't want to do too little so what we deliver to them has no value to our customers. Finally, there's the transition, which is, I'm sure you've guessed by now, where we successfully release our product or service into the hands of our stakeholders and our customers. As a disciplined agilist, we also follow these 8 principles. So I'm not going to go through them sort of in detail here. I am going to just quickly highlight them and just tie a couple of words to them. So we want to delight customers. Well, there's nothing really, really odd about that. Of course, we want to delight customers, and they are at the heart of everything that we do. If we don't have that at center, well, why are we really doing what we're doing? We want to be awesome when we're practicing our agility as well, as in we want to be the best versions of ourselves, both as individuals and as teams. Context counts for us, as in we face unique situations, and because our situations are unique, well, we should tailor the way that we work to match that unique context, and we should also recognize that our context evolves over time. So when our context evolves, we can't just sort of sit still and go, well, that's it. We have a way of working now. We're not going to change that. No, we should continuously evolve our way of working as our context evolves as well. We want to be pragmatic, as in we don't want to be purist. We want to be pragmatic. So our goal is to be as effective as possible, not to do something because it says we have to do something. As the disciplined agilist, we also believe that choice is good. You will see that very clearly when we get to the DA browser and the online DA toolkit, that we don't just present you with one choice, we present you with a multitude of choices. We want to optimize flow, as in sometimes it's convenient to do something for us because it just fits the way that we work, and in our local context, that's very convenient, but it may have an adverse effect on someone either downstream or upstream from you that, well, we're not really optimizing flow if we're just thinking about ourselves and ignoring everything else that's sort of in the value stream or the flow of work that we are in as a team. We want to organize around products and services. And what that means is that most organizations today are sort of organized as a pyramid, as a hierarchy, if you will. And we have maybe, we have developers here, maybe we have testers here, we have marketing here, we have sales here. And yet that's not how work flows throughout our organization. Work generally flows this way. So it touches a little bit here, 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 here. And we want to start to reorganize the way that we structure our organizations to better match that, because that's going to enable us to be able to deliver value more smoothly and without fewer sort of slowdowns along the way. Finally, we are enterprise aware. And what that means is that what I do in my team, I have, it's our responsibility to be aware of what's going on around us. So, for example, if we make a change to the way that we work, well, we have to make sure that there's no adverse effect on other teams. Maybe we change something that is more convenient for us, but it actually has a negative impact on another team. While that's not being enterprise aware, we want to make sure that the choices we make do not have any adverse impact on other teams, and vice versa. Other teams are thinking the same way, so the choices they make do not have any adverse effects on the way that we work. So that's what enterprise awareness means. So in short, disciplined agile teams, they start where they are, they improve incrementally, and they always strive to get better. All right, like I said, there are going to be some interactive elements here, so let's have a short quiz. All right. So feel free to this is what we'll call a true false. So the answer is either true or false to this statement. So feel free to type that into the chat, whether you believe that this is true or whether this statement is false. You can also just type a T or an F. So the first statement here is that the inception phase ends with an agreement between the team and the stakeholders of the work. What do you think? True or false? T or F? All right, I'm seeing a lot of T's, and I agree. That is true. Yes, so that is how we know the inception phase is done. That's how we know that we're ready to move into actually building our product or service, because we have agreement between the team that's going to be doing the work and the stakeholders of this work. All right, let's do the next one. So true or false, the goal of the construction phase is to produce sufficient functionality for our customers. What do you think? Is that true or is that false? T or F? I am seeing mainly T's again, and I agree that is true. So the construction phase is that phase in the middle. We have the inception, which is where we're getting ready for the work. Construction is actually constructing the work, doing the actual work. And then we have the transition phase, which is where we release our work into the hands of our customers. So yes, the construction phase, the goal of that is to produce just enough value, just enough functionality, so it has value to our stakeholders, to our customers. All right, last one. True or false? Be purist is one of the discipline agile principles. What do you think? True or false? I am seeing mainly false, and I agree that is false. It is be pragmatic. That is one of the DA principles. Be purist is the opposite of being pragmatic, as in we don't want to be purist. Purist is hang on, let me just find this. Here we go. So here is the Scrum guide. You can see it's very thin, and it's very thin because it has a very specific set of working, which is sort of a prescriptive way. And some people misunderstand the Scrum guide from a purist standpoint to say, well, if you're not doing what's in here, you're doing Scrum wrong. That's purist, which is the opposite of pragmatic. Discipline Agile, on the other hand, the WOW book, the Choose Your WOW book, is this thick, and this is this thick because it doesn't have one way of working. It's not prescriptive. It's not prescribing you have to work this way. It is being pragmatic. It's offering up a lot of choices where, okay, you pick what fits your context, your situation. So it's the opposite of purist. It is pragmatic. So yes, be purist is not one of the DA principles. All right, let's move on to the next section. So using Discipline Agile to scale Agile across a large, complex program. Let's look more closely at that. So meet ICBC. So the Insurance Corporation of British Columbia, ICBC, they issue auto insurance in the province of British Columbia here in Canada. In 2018, they set out to modernize how auto insurance was calculated. And the program consisted of 8 teams spread across 3 distinct departments. The challenge they were faced was that they needed more coordination and they needed more collaboration to be successfully deliver this large, complex program. So faced with this situation where the teams are codependent on successful delivery of this new insurance calculation, how does the organization get the teams to become better at coordinating and collaborating? That was sort of the challenge they were faced with. The solution we're going to be looking at is that, well, ICBC started applying Discipline Agile. And concretely, they applied 3 elements of DA. They created a unified language across all these teams in the program, so they started speaking the same language. They used the program lifecycle, and they also utilized the DA toolkit to evolve their ways of working when their context evolves. So that is what we're going to be looking at right now. All right. So let's first reflect on this question right here. What does your Agile language focus on? Well, if we look at Scrum, if you're practicing Scrum, well, the language that Scrum focuses on is the delivery team, as in the team that's there in the middle that is delivering the work. That is the language of Scrum. That is what that language focuses on. We can take SAFe as well. Well, the language that SAFe focuses on is delivering value through a large program. Again, if you look at all the elements here on this page in this model, the language there is clearly around, well, how do we deliver value via a large program? And then finally, we can look at Discipline Agile. Well, the language that Discipline Agile focuses on is the entire enterprise. You can see that it's not just the team. It is not just delivering value through a large program. It is the entire enterprise. So you can see right here, well, all these hexagons are really functional areas of an organization. We have legal, we have vendor management, we have finance, we have governance, we have strategy, we have marketing, we have sales, we have product management, we have release management, we have IT operations, we have support. Those are all functional areas of an organization. And so the language that Discipline Agile uses covers this entire enterprise, and it focuses on this entire enterprise. For example, the role names are agnostic in Discipline Agile. So as you can see here, we choose to call in Scrum, well, the person up there that's called a team lead will be called a Scrum Master in Scrum. But because we recognize that not every team is going to be practicing Scrum, it doesn't make sense for us to say, well, that person's role is a Scrum Master. No, we use the more agnostic term of a team lead. Of course, if you are practicing Scrum, and if Scrum Master is a known sort of terminology in your area, in your organization, or in your department, well, of course, you should continue to use the term Scrum Master because that fits you. Here are those phases we talked about a little bit earlier. You can see the inception, construction, and transition there. Well, everyone knows what the phases mean across the enterprise because we're using Discipline Agile to create this unified language, this shared language. Again, if I go up to another team and I say, hey, have you started your construction phase yet? They know what construction phase is because we're using this shared language across all the teams. And then finally, if I go up to another team and say, hey, have you planned your release and have you used the goal diagram for planned release? Well, when I say that, they all know where to find the information, which is using the Discipline Agile toolkit. And let's have a look at that for a moment. So I am going to go in here, which is on pmi.org /Discipline Agile. So if I go into resources, you will see there is the Discipline Agile browser right here. And then I go into, I want the most recent version, which was released here about a month and a bit ago, DA 5.6. So just that takes a moment here to load. And here you can see here is the DA toolkit. And the one we were looking at was planning the release. And I know that's right here in Inception. And so let's take a moment to just talk about, well, how do I read this map and compass that we have here in front of us? Well, first of all, as you will notice, the goals are split into the three phases: inception, construction, transition, and then we have a phase which is not really a phase, but it's an ongoing sort of effort, which is, well, it's called ongoing, and we have some goals underneath there. Then we also have, for all the other elements in Discipline Agile, here I will go back to this one. So you can see here we have product management, program management, so on and so forth. You will see they start to show up here as well, right here: product management, program management, and so on and so forth. So they're split in, essentially the way that it's split up is that we have sort of this here, what's called Discipline Agile Delivery. Then we have Discipline DevOps, we have the value stream layer, and we have the Discipline Agile Enterprise layer. And that's how the DA browser or the online DA toolkit is architected. Let's go back here to plan the release. So if I ask another team and they're practicing DA and I say, have you been planning the release and how did you do that? Well, they know where to go and find this information because they go here to this goal of planning the release. Then what we have here in the middle are what we call decision points, which means that when I plan the release, well, there are some decisions I need to think about, as in how do I source the plan? What's the scope of the plan? What's my scheduling strategy? What's the level of detail of my plan? How am I going to estimate the work? What unit of estimation am I going to use? And how am I going to capture the plan? So let's look at capturing the plan here as well. Well, how am I going to capture the plan? Well, you can see I have a lot of choices. Well, I can both go, well, I want a Gantt chart high level, and maybe I want to use a business canvas, or I want to use a burnout chart, or whatever suits my needs, I can go in and pick right here. And these are then the options or the strategies or the techniques that when I capture my plan, which is my decision point, I have then some choices, which are right there to the very right. So, for example, maybe I want to do a high-level Gantt chart. Well, you can see here, down here, we have what we call the trade-off table. So it has a brief description of what a high-level Gantt chart is, and then it has some trade-off points over here to the right. Same thing, well, I really want to do a burn-up chart because I think that's really going to help us. Well, we have a description of what a burn-up chart is, and then we have a brief description here, or trade-off of, well, here's what you should consider if you make that choice. You will also notice that some of these are italicized and bolded. So that means when a decision, or when an option rather, is highlighted, is italicized and bolded, that means that everything else being equal, that's a really good starting point for teams. You will also notice that some of these are what we call an ordered list, as it has an arrow pointing up. So when there's an arrow pointing up, that means that this is an ordered list, as in, generally speaking, in terms of increasing your agility. The options that are at the top are better for increasing your agility than what's at the bottom. So a good example of that is this right here, estimating strategy. So some really good estimating strategies are educated guesses, either by experienced individuals or by the team. And sort of the worst for your agility is that your stakeholders, or using function point or no estimate, are some of the, they are going to decrease your agility. Then we have another sourcing the plan. How are we going to source the plan? Well, are we going to let the team self-organize and figure out the plan, which again is the best choice for increasing your agility? The worst choice for increasing your agility is letting management figure out what your plan should be. All right, so that was a brief glimpse into the DA browser, or the online DA toolkit, as is also sometimes called. And we are going to get back to that later on, but I wanted to show it. I wanted to show that right now. All right. Oh, sorry, I'm getting. Oh, someone is sharing. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Ani Ben, you mistakenly shared. Let me share. Here we go. Okay. You should be able to see the slides now again.
Yes, we can see the slides.
All right, good. All right, fantastic. So fingers off the share button, please. Thank you. All right. So just again, going back to this right here. So this was what I was talking about, that I'll just repeat, just very briefly here, so when you have, so you see some of them are bolded, some of these choices and options are bolded and italicized. That means that everything else been equal, these are really good places for a team to start. You'll see that some of these options are also have an arrow pointing up. When an arrow is pointing up, that means that the options and choices at the top are going to increase your agility more than the choices at the bottom. And a really good example of that is when it comes to sourcing the plan, as in figuring out the plan. Who's going to come up with the plan? Well, are we going to let the team self-organize and figure out the plan, or are we going to have management create the plan for the team? And in terms of increasing your agility, well, we all know that the best way forward here is to have the team figure out the plan themselves. And the worst choice in terms of agility is to have management create the plan for the team on the team's behalf. All right, so that was, whoops, this one. So that was very briefly about, how to use the DA browser and the online DA toolkit, and sort of starting to show you how to read this map and read this compass, essentially. So we are going to come back to it. So you'll get a couple more chances to have a look at it. And I want to share as well that the DA browser, and I'll drop the link in here, that it is free for anyone. It does not require a paid PMI membership or anything like that. So that's fantastic, a fantastic resource. All right, so that was the first point. The second point, that was around unified language. Well, what else did ICBC do? Well, they used what we call the program lifecycle to deliver this large, complex program. So what is the program lifecycle? So the program lifecycle is how it describes how a large, a team of teams can work together on one sort of program, on one solution or product that they're developing. And they are large agile teams are actually rare in practice, but they do happen. And when they do happen, well, we need something like this, the program lifecycle. And if you're familiar with SAFe, you'll see that there are a lot of similarities here. As in, we have the different teams that are doing parallel development. So it's a team of teams. Then we need some coordination. We need coordination in terms of the work. We need coordination in terms of architecture and also people. Both dependencies and sort of the strategy and the direction. So we need coordination between all these different teams. And then, of course, we'll have some input to this. Well, we'll have input from product management. We'll have some enterprise architecture input. We'll have some input from portfolio management as well. Then, as we're going along here as this team of teams, we're working, we're continuously integrating and testing across our teams, because then we know when we're ready to release, we have the least amount of surprises when we get there. And then you can see down here, again, tying it to the inception and the construction phase, that still count, as in we still have an inception phase as a team, even though we're still a team of teams. So we still need the stakeholder vision. In our construction phase, we still need to prove out our architecture, that we can build, what it is we want to build, and we still want to have sufficient functionality, and so on and so forth. All right, so that was the first thing they did. They used the program lifecycle to organize this large team of teams. The second thing they did was they explored options for coordinating activities. So again, let's go back into the Discipline Agile browser and go and find here. So I know that coordinate activities is under the ongoing goal. And you can see right here. So let's look at concretely what were some of the things that ICBC did with this large program. Well, they created an architecture team. As in, they said, well, we know we need to coordinate the architecture between these different areas and all these different 8 teams. So we need to, at a frequent interval, we need to get the architecture owners, as in the technical leads, together and talk about the architecture, so we make sure we lower that risk of architecture. They also set up common cadences, as in they said, wow, we want the sprint to start and end on the same time, no matter which team you're on inside this program. They did coordination meetings and Scrum. This one here, they did Scrum of Scrums, which again are, some of you may already be doing this today, which is where we invite one representative from each team to coordinate the work more from a dependency standpoint and sort of blockers, what we need from each other. They met once a week and went through that. Finally, they also created a product owner team, and they visualized the work and the workflow. So during their Scrum of Scrums, they would have this large board up, on a whiteboard that showed high level what are all the teams working on. We could even highlight dependencies between these different work items, and that was a way to visualize and get a better flow and a better coordination and collaboration across the different teams. So those are some 3 or 4 concrete choices that this team at ICBC made using the Discipline Agile browser here. Finally, ICBC utilized the DA toolkit to evolve their way of working as their context was evolving. So again, Discipline Agile encourages you to start where you are, incrementally improve, and then always strive to get better. So, for example, there was one team in ICBC that wanted to update their life cycle, as in the fundamental way that they work, and because their context has changed. So the team has been practicing Scrum for a couple of years now, and they've gotten really good at it. And they felt like, well, with the maturity, they wanted to switch to what we call the lean life cycle, which is based on Kanban, because that would give them more flexibility and it would allow them to better deal with sort of this increasing amount of unplannable work and unplanned work that they were seeing. So let's go have a look at that. So I happen to know that this again is under ongoing, and it is under what we call evolve your way of working. And as you can see right here, select a life cycle. And life cycle is sort of like a starter pack for teams, as in that's the first thing you have to choose when a team is put together. You have to choose what life cycle you're going to base your way of working, your WOW on. And then obviously then you take that as sort of the foundational layer, and then you start to add additional choices and options on top, again, using the DA browser or the online DA toolkit. So you can see here that what they're practicing the Scrum life cycle. It was working for them, but they'd matured. They needed something else because their context was starting to change. So they wanted to try out the lean life cycle that we have right here. And obviously you don't just do that overnight. It takes some practice. It takes some preparation. They did some training on lean to better understand that flow, how to switch from using Scrum to using lean/Kanban. And you can see here, we can get a brief explanation of what the lean life cycle is, with some trade-offs here as well, comparing it to some of the other ways of working. All right. Finally, there's also the example that they wanted to speed up their estimation. So another delivery team in the organization at ICBC, they felt that what they were doing today using planning poker, they're like, it was too slow. They had a sense that we can actually move through our regular estimation by switching to another way of doing that. So they asked their Scrum Master to look for other faster ways of estimating that work, and let's have a look at that. Now, estimating work is up here under plan the release, and you can see here estimating strategy. So you can see we have lots of choices. Well, planning poker is certainly one of them, and a lot of Agile teams will start there. So there's nothing inherently wrong with planning poker. But what they wanted to do, they said, well, we think that there's something that's going to increase our agility, as in it's going to speed us up in this instance, so we can move faster through this and actually deliver value faster to our customers because we spent less time on estimation. So they moved up to what we call the relative mass grid estimation up here, which is where you take what you have. Let's say you have 25 cards, 25 stories that you want to estimate. You start to put them out on this relative grid, as in we find what's the smallest piece of work here. We put that way over here to the left, and we look at where's the largest piece of work, and that becomes the end point here of the scale. And then we go sort of through each story, each card one by one, and we read it out. So, okay, what size is this? Is it, just a little bit smaller than the largest, or a little bit bigger than the biggest, or is it sort of the middle, or where does it fall? And then we start to plot them out on the grid. And what they found by switching from planning poker to this relative mass grid estimation was that they were speeding up the time it took them to go through their estimation. And again, that helped their agility because they're able to move through it quicker and spend more time than actually building out the product that they were building out. All right, so that was visiting ICBC and looking how concrete, 3 concrete items that they used from Discipline Agile to increase agility and scale Agile across a large, complex program. Let's do another sort of interactive game right here. Do you remember? So let's have a look at this. What view does Discipline Agile take? Does it take an enterprise view, a team view, a program view, or an individual view? Again, you can just type in the chat 1, 2, 3, or 4. What do you think? Does Discipline Agile take an enterprise view, a team view, a program view, or an individual view? Oh, you guys are good. I'm seeing lots of ones here, and yes, I would agree. That is the view that Discipline Agile takes. It doesn't just focus on the team. It doesn't just focus on a program, and it doesn't just focus on the individual. It focuses on the entire enterprise. All right, let's do the next one. Which role is not a specific DA team role? team lead, product owner, scrum master, or architecture owner? Which one is not a specific DA role? Is it 1, 2, 3, or 4? All right, I'm seeing mostly 3s. You guys rock. Yes, it is Scrum Master. Scrum Master is not specifically called out in the DA team role simply because it's not agnostic. It is, well, Scrum based. And yes, you can, of course, practice Scrum inside Discipline Agile, yet we want to keep the roles agnostic because you can also practice Kanban or Lean or a mix of the two or a more traditional way of working. So we wanted to make sure that the naming was agnostic. So again, it becomes more universal across all the teams that are practicing Discipline Agile. All right, let's do the last one. Do you have to have a PMI membership, a paid PMI membership to access the online DA toolkit, the DA browser? What do you think? Yes or no? Do you need a paid membership to access the DA toolkit, the online DA toolkit? 1 or 2? All right. I'm seeing mostly no's, and I agree. Yes, that is absolutely correct. You do not need a paid PMI membership to access this fantastic curated collection of Agile, Lean, and traditional choices and options. All right. So let's look at the next topic, which is applying Discipline Agile to a non-software team. So how do we do that? Well, we're actually going to look a little bit inwardly here because meet the DA learning team here at PMI. So the Discipline Agile learning team here at PMI is responsible for producing, maintaining, and improving our Discipline Agile courseware. They wanted to adopt part of the Discipline Agile into their way of working or into their WOW. The challenge was that the team was working with a complex set of internal and external stakeholders. And by having to work with them, they had to work with these stakeholders both to produce, maintain, and improve the courseware. And the environment of stakeholders was sort of ever-changing, was an ever-changing landscape, which made, again, increased the complexity. The solution was that the learning team started to apply Discipline Agile, and concretely, they applied two elements of DA. One, they utilized the full delivery cycle, which we're going to look at in a moment, and they continuously evolved their WOW, as we've talked about as well. So let's look at this. So sort of the question here is that to phase or not to phase? Well, that really is the question. So if you recall, we talked a little bit about this in the beginning in section 1 when we took a brief look at what is Discipline Agile. So let's look a little bit more closely at that. Well, this is what the learning team did. They said, well, we want to start using the full delivery cycle, which are these phases: inception, construction, and transition. Well, inception is all about getting started in the right direction. And we get everyone on the same page. So before the DA learning team, they start a large piece of work. They develop this common vision for the work that's ahead of them to make sure all of this large set of stakeholders, both internal and external, are on the same page and agree this is what we're doing. So the courseware development does not begin until there's agreement in this common vision. So for example, well, what does that mean? Well, that means that, we want to make sure high level, what is the scope of what we're setting out to do? High level, how long is it going to take? High level, what is it going to cost? What are the risks that we've identified so far? Who's on the team? How are we going to work together? How are we going to communicate to our stakeholders? And so on and so forth. What is the objective? What do we want to achieve with this course? Well, maybe some metrics around number of participants that we want to take this course, and so on and so forth. So that are all elements that go into developing the common vision. And again, going back to the DA browser, the online DA toolkit, you'll see right here, developing the common vision is again under inception. And here are all the different decision points that you can think about. And again, all the different choices you can make under each of these decision points. So for example, how are we going to communicate the vision? Well, we could have a kickoff meeting, we could create an information radar, we can have a milestone review, or we can simply just document it. So again, these are all choices that you can then make, or options that you can choose from when you decide how you communicate the vision. The level of detail that goes into your common vision. Is it going to be lightweight, or are you going to spend more time on it and make it more detailed? Again, your context is going to dictate that. Well, maybe your organization is more comfortable traditionally with a more detailed overview, or maybe it's more comfortable with a lightweight. So you have choices here. You don't just have to do one. We're not prescribing you it has to be detailed or it has to be lightweight. We're saying, well, no, you make the choice based on what you want to achieve and what your context is right now. Then there's the construction phase, which is sort of like ready, set, go. And in my experience, it can be difficult to sort of hold people back a little bit because they're so eager they want to jump into the construction phase right away without getting the common vision, without getting the agreement with the stakeholders. And we usually end up paying for that later on, as in we'll start developing something and the stakeholders go, really, is that what we're doing? I thought we were doing something different. And then you sort of have to go back and create that common vision. Anyway, so we might as well do it up front in the inception phase. So getting ready to start here is that, well, with the agreement on this common vision, we're ready to, the DA learning team, again, taking them as the example, they're ready to start the work now. And then we know that our construction phase ends when we've produced enough functionality and the courseware is ready to be released. Then there's the transition phase, which is crossing the T's and dotting the I's, making sure everything is taken care of so we have a successful delivery into the hands of the customers, and our customers can actually use what we're putting into their hands. So from the DA learning team, well, what does getting ready for the release means? Well, it means that simply creating the courseware itself is not enough. It has to be usable by the people that are going to be both delivering the course as in the instructors, but also the student, the participants who is going to be taking the course. So the DA learning team, they take advantage of a number of options in the ensure production readiness goal diagram. Let's have a look at that. So I know that's over here under transition, ensure production readiness. So you can see here there are a number of things we can do. While we can do, we want to finalize, we want to communicate the deployment. We want to make instructors aware that there's a new coursework coming. We want to make students aware that there's a new coursework coming as well. Maybe there's some support environment we need to prepare as well. Maybe it's the PMI help desk or customer care. They need an FAQ on this new courseware. And maybe for the instructors who are going to be delivering this new coursework, maybe there's some training we need to do so they can deliver it in the best way possible. So again, these are all elements to think about when we release something into the hands of our customers to make sure it's as successful as possible. It could also be that we want to pilot or beta test our courseware. We wanted to create, we've done that from time to time when we created new courseware here at PMI, that we don't just release it. We say, well, let's pilot it with a group of people, get their feedback, make those changes, and then we release it. So again, this is where the DA learning team came and found choices in terms of how to weave discipline Agile in and agility really in to the way that they work. All right, last topic. So patterns and anti-patterns of evolving your way of working. And there, I apologize in advance, there's going to be a little bit of repetition here because, well, we'll have a pattern and then the anti-pattern is sort of the opposite of that. So just bear with me here for a moment. So good patterns when it comes to evolving your way of working. You want to adapt to your context and you want to be pragmatic. You want to remember that you have more than one option, and we've clearly seen that here using the DA browser, that you don't just have one choice, you have lots of choices. You want to involve the team and you want to let them have a say. That is a really key point. We don't just want to make choices on the team's behalf. We want to involve them because otherwise, if someone outside the team makes choice that you're going to be working this way, then they don't own it and they don't really buy into it, and it rarely something good comes out of that. So a classic example of that I've seen repeated over and over and over is someone management will come in and say, you're going to be doing Scrum tomorrow, off you go, good luck. That is someone outside the team making the decision on their behalf, and it rarely goes well. We want the team involved. We want them to have a say. And we want to be enterprise aware and not just do what is locally convenient. As in, it might be convenient for me to work this way in my little local context, but maybe I'm actually inadvertently getting in a way of a team sort of downstream or a team upstream, and it has an adverse overall effect on sort of the flow of work across the company, across my organization. So we want to be enterprise aware. We want to remove those blinders and look outside of what is going on in outside of our team, and especially when it comes to evolving our wow. Maybe we're working one way today, and that's working sort of for everyone, sort of upstream and downstream. Great. But for us, it doesn't really work. We want to do something different, and we can't just go ahead and make that change without thinking about and without inquiring and exploring with these other teams, both downstream and upstream. If we change this, do you think it will have an adverse impact on you? We have to be enterprise aware when we evolve our way of working. So manage patterns, and again, it's going to be a little bit of repetition here, but we want to avoid being purist and being judgmental, as in purist meaning that there's one way of doing things and only one way, and if you're not doing that way, well, you're not doing it the right way. The Scrum Guide is a good example of that. They can be misinterpreted that way to sort of hit people over the head and saying, well, if you're not doing, estimation this way, or if you're not using story points, or if you're not, having a retrospective every 2 weeks, well, I'm going to hit it over the head and say, shame on you. You're not doing it the right way. That's being purist. That's being judgmental. We want to avoid that. Nothing good comes out of that. Offering up just one option. Again, the Scrum Guide, a classic example of offering up just one option. It's great. If it fits your context, it's fantastic. By all means, go ahead and do that. If it does not fit your context, what do you do then? Do you keep doing this knowingly that it doesn't really work for you? Or do you go someplace else that will give you more choices, like Discipline Agile? Again, making decisions on the team's behalf. Nothing really good comes out of that. We want to involve them. We want them to have a voice. We want them to have a say. So research shows that people accept change better if they were part of the decision, if they were part of the process. And again, here, optimizing for local convenience. We don't want to do that. We don't just want to get really good in one area of our organization because, well, maybe that inadvertently has a negative impact on teams either downstream or teams upstream. We don't want to do that. We want to be enterprise aware. We want to take the entire work stream or flow of work and value stream into consideration when we make decisions. All right, so look at that, just on time. Let's land this plane. So wrapping up, and we'll have time for Q&A. So the first thing that I'd like you to do is find this piece of paper or wherever you took your note, and again just take a moment, sort of close your eyes and reflect for 10 seconds. What is your knowledge of Discipline Agile now? Has it moved? As in, if you scored yourself a 4 now, maybe a 5, 4 before, and maybe a 5 now. Just reflect on that, close your eyes, reflect on that for 10 seconds and write down what your new knowledge of Discipline Agile is now. Again, on the same sort of subjective scale that you used before, from 1 to 10. And then I'd love for you to comment in the chat section if you moved up or if you stayed the same. Hopefully you didn't move down, but you never know. Maybe I did a poor job that you actually decreased your knowledge of Discipline Agile. So so go ahead and put that in, whether you moved up or stayed the same. I'd love to see that. Thank you. All right, so as you put that in there, I wanted to share ways and opportunities for keeping, continuing to learn with Discipline Agile. So you can visit the pmi.org/Discipline Agile for more information on the toolkit, the browser that we use today, the mindset, the books, the principles, classes that, speaking of the Discipline Agile learning team, how they apply Discipline Agile, they're the ones developing all these great courses, from the DA Scrum Master to DA Senior Scrum Master, DA Coach, DA Value Stream Consultant, and so on and so forth. They're also, I know Anthony put in some free courses to kick off and the 45-minute sort of free Scrum overview. They're there, they're available as well. All right, so last thing before we get to the question and answer section here is that I'd like you, again, just to think about this for a moment. So again, close your eyes, just reflect on this for 10, 15 seconds. What 3 words would you use to summarize the past 45 minutes? Well, now it's 50 minutes. So what 3 words would you use to summarize the past 50 minutes? What would those be? If you had just 3 words you could share. Reflect on that for a moment, and I'd love to see you typing into the chat so you can share that feedback loop with me. That would be fantastic. Thank you. 3 words you'd use to summarize the past 50 minutes. All right, as you do that, I am going to go to the last slide. So I see informative, enlightening growth, extremely value-adding, insightful, great, wow. Love it. Fantastic. Thank you for sharing. All right, so last part, you ask the questions and I provide the answers. All right, still learning, great, need more, an eye-opener, informative, insightful, valuable. Fantastic, lovely. Thank you for sharing. I did notice a couple of questions because the people were very helpful in putting a Q in front of it. Yes, here we go. I see three questions typed in there. So there's one from Pete asking, must the team complete the construction phase activities before moving to the transition phase? Yes. And again, so DA is pragmatic, as in we can't tell you how much, how little to do in the construction phase. Your stakeholders can tell you that. And that's also why we do frequent demonstrations of the work that we do sort of continuously throughout the transition phase. If you're practicing Scrum or the Agile lifecycle, which is Scrum based, well, you'll do them every 2 weeks or however long your sprint is. If you're practicing Lean or Kanban, the Kanban based way of working, well, you will do demonstrations whenever it's necessary to your stakeholders. Regardless of your way of working, you will have these frequent demonstrations, and they will tell you, your stakeholders will tell you if you're getting closer to now we have enough functionality, we can now move from the construction phase into the transition phase. Then there's another question here from, I think, Aloka. How do you manage change and risk in Discipline Agile? Great question. So let's start with risk first. So risk is actually really well managed in Discipline Agile. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So the first example is the inception phase, the common vision. So that is there on purpose to lower the risk, to pay down our risk. And I'm sure you can guess by now what kind of risks we're paying down by doing that common vision at the start, during the inception phase. So the risk we're lowering is our stakeholders' expectation, as in what is it we're building? How long is it going to take? How much is it going to cost? Who's involved, and so on and so forth. And so when you start the work, you've already lowered the risk of the stakeholders coming and saying to you, oh, wait a moment, are we doing this? I thought we're doing that. Where do we misunderstood each other? Where did the train go off the rails? And you're lowering the risk. You're not completely removing it, but we're certainly lowering it quite significantly by having the stakeholders up front agree to, yes, this is what we're doing. Yes, this is how long it's going to take. And yes, this is what it's going to cost. Another example of lowering risks in Discipline Agile is we have a milestone in our construction phase. So we have our shared vision. We all agree. We move forward. We start producing our solution, our product, or our service. We start building that, constructing it. And one of the first milestones we have is what we call prove architecture early. And what that means is that, wow, we want to, let's say we're building a new feature and we happen to use that new feature is something we either haven't done before, maybe it utilizes technology we haven't used before, maybe it involves a new set of customers we haven't dealt with before, and there's a lot of risks around that. Well, the way we then pay down that risk, we lower that risk, is we prove out early on through either a proof of concept, a prototype, some sort of testing, that we can actually build what we're setting out to build the way we're setting out to build it. So we don't have the surprise at the very end of the construction phase where, oh, we can't actually do that. No, we show that, we prove that architecturally upfront as early as possible. And we're talking about, maybe even in the first sprint, so in the first 2 weeks, maybe the second sprint, but as early as possible, we want to create these proof of concepts, these pilots, or whatever it is we use to prove out that we can actually build what we're setting out to build it. So that's just another way that it's lowering risks. Then you had a question about change. So yes, actually, how do we manage change? So a couple of points about managing change. I want to highlight one specifically, and this is also mentioned in the Choose Your Wow book. So that is what we call we use experiments it's called lean change management. So lean change management is one way of managing change, and it's called out again here in the Choose Your Wow book. And the way we do that is that we run, this is a very simplified sort of version of it, but essentially we run experiments. We say that, well, we think that, we see this as a challenge and we think this is going to help it. We think this is going to solve the challenge. Great. Let's run that as an experiment. Okay, so we agree we're going to run it for 2 sprints if the team is practicing Scrum or the Agile life cycle. So for the next 4 weeks, we're going to run this experiment. Maybe it's a different way of estimating. We're going to try it out for these 2 sprints. We're going to see if it works. And then we're going to come back and evaluate after these 2 sprints, after these 4 weeks. Did it have the impact we were sort of hypothesizing it would have? If it does, great, we're going to adopt it. If it didn't, we're going to throw it away, and maybe we're going to try another one. We're going to back to the DA browser, and we're going to pick another. So again, if I pull this up right here, taking the example. So again, we're in the estimation. So the way we estimate, so maybe we're using planning poker today, but we want to use something else. We want to use the relative mass grid estimation. Okay, great. Let's try it out for 2 sprints, and let's come back after 2 sprints to figure out whether it worked or not. If it worked, great, we'll keep it. If it didn't, we'll throw it out. And maybe that wasn't, for some reason it didn't work for us. So we're gonna do educated guess by the team or something like that. Thank you for that question. And I see one more in this block right here, and there are probably some further down, which I'm not looking at right now. The next question is, how would you factor in the impact of geographical distribution of the team on the decision points? Great question, and very relevant question here, and also in these, in these COVID times. So Discipline Agile takes that into consideration. Again, if you read the Scrum guide, I know things have changed a little bit over the past couple of years, but Scrum used to be that well, you have to be co-located, you have to be in the same room, you have to be a small team between 9 and 12, and if you're not, well, you can't do Agile. It just doesn't work. And we know now that that's simply not true. You are sometimes in situations where you have to have a large team, maybe 15, maybe 20, maybe 25 members. You are in a situation, especially now here during the new times we live in with the COVID pandemic, you have to have distributed team members, as in we're all working from home, or we're not just working from home, but we're also hiring. Now that we're not in the same office together, we're hiring people from other countries or other regions in our own country, whatever it may be. And of course we can make it work. And again, Discipline Agile has lots of guidance on how to make this work when you have a distributed team. Yes, sometimes it's more difficult to make decisions, but it also has its upside. So again, yes, that's something that's absolutely factored in to Discipline Agile, that you can have a geographically distributed team and still be effective, and it has guidance on that. All right, I'm going to go to the very bottom because there might be some more questions down there. And all right, we have 2 minutes left. So I am going to look at from Licondo, the very last question that was posted: what alternatives are there to Discipline Agile and what makes it superior? So I'm not going to use the word superior. I'm just going to use it has different benefits. So the alternatives to Discipline Agile are, there's Scrum, which, is the most sort of common and well-known Agile way of working. There's Kanban, there's the Scale Agile framework, or SAFe. And what I would say that they're actually not alternatives, they're rather complementary to Discipline Agile is the way that I look at them. Meaning that you can have an organization, if you think about your organization, you're going to have teams that want to work in a traditional way because that just works for them. Okay, great. Discipline Agile says, well, go ahead, you can do that. You'll have teams whose work is plannable, and you can plan out, 2 weeks in advance. And yes, great, you should work in a Scrum way because that works for you. So go ahead and do that. You'll have teams that are more mature, or maybe have to have work that's not plannable, and maybe so a Kanban or a lean-based way of working just better for them. So Discipline Agile says, great, you should do that, work in that way. And so and finally, you may also have a team of teams, like we saw with the example here in this presentation, that's working on a large program together. So they need to organize in a different fashion. And so Discipline Agile says, great, you should do that. Go ahead and create a team of teams. You will have the program lifecycle. And so Discipline Agile is not in opposition to any of these ways of working. They're rather, again, complementary, as in your organization is almost for certain complex, as in your different teams will need different ways of working, and Discipline Agile supports that. We say, great, we can all do that. We can all find our own way of working. And then what ties us together, sort of this underlying current that ties us together, is the discipline agile way of working, as in the discipline agile sort of mindset. It's the language, as we saw with ICBC, that created a shared language. It's the fact that we have the toolkit that we can all reference and use as a shared reference guide. It's the fact that we're enterprise aware. All those tie us together regardless of how we're working. And that, I think, is the key strength of discipline agile, that it allows for that diversity with the different teams, how they work, and yet we still have a shared understanding and a shared language, regardless of how we work in our own teams. Look at that. That took us straight to the end, even 1 minute over. I apologize for that. So yes, we will, like Anthony said, we'll be sharing the slides here afterwards. Feel free to reach out to me or Anthony if you have more questions. Maybe it's simpler to Anthony, because or post it on the PMI Africa LinkedIn page. If you have more questions, then we can answer them that way, or send them to Anthony as well, and we will do our best to answer even more questions. All right. Again, thank you so much for your time. I know it's getting late where you are in the world. I really appreciate you spending this hour with me, learning more about Discipline Agile. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Klaus, for that powerful presentation. Also to our attendees, thank you for joining us during this session. We'll have another Agile session at the end of this month. We'll be sending more details in regards to the registration and also the topics that will be covered. From us in Dubai and the PMI team, we thank you all and wish you all a great evening. Thanks, and bye-bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was very interesting. Looking forward to the next one. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Great stuff, Klaus. Thank you very much for this session. We had a very huge number of participants, just 148. Great stuff. Not sure if you're going to be joining us in Lagos, Nigeria for the Africa conference.
No, I don't have plans. I would love to, though. Maybe hopefully next time.
Right.
I've not been to Lagos.
Okay.
Or wherever it is next time.
It is actually. Next time is going to be highly likely in Kenya. So.
Kenya. Yeah. All right. Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you again, and have a great evening.
You too. Have a great day, and thank you very much. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you very much for everything that you have provided for us.
Right. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.